Boston swept by Cleveland. Gordon Edes joins us, covered the Red Sox for 2 decades. I remember having him on many of my programs over the years with the Boston Globe, and now he is the team historian, and he joins us here for a few minutes on Big Board Sports. Gordon, Roger Weiland up in Albany. How are you today?
Roger, not quite the history we were hoping to write this October, that's for sure.
No, I mean, I know there were people who thought Cleveland could win this series, but those who thought they could win were picking Cleveland maybe in 5. I guess the surprise here, Gordon, is the 3-game sweep, right?
Yeah, I think so. And certainly we thought that the Indians would be shorthanded with their starting pitching, having guys out. Terry Francona really set the tone for the series by bringing Andrew Miller in, what was it, the 5th inning, 6th inning in game 1, and giving them it was 5th inning, and giving them 2 innings, and getting 40 pitches out of both Cody Allen and Miller to win that first game, setting up Kluber for game 2. And so you come back down 0-2, and I think the 2 big storylines out of this postseason is, one, the fact that the Red Sox offense was shut down to the degree it was. They never scored more than a run in a single inning in the entire series, and the fact that they didn't get any kind of length from their starting pitching. All 3 guys were gone by the 5th. Price, Porcello, and last night Clay Buchholz. So it was pretty stunning. But again, give the Indians credit. They played very, very well.
No, and Terry Francona, Gordon pushes a lot of right buttons, and he did. To me, it goes back to, I know Porcello didn't pitch well in game 1, but David Price, Gordon, at what point does he start to pitch well in the postseason? I mean, that was a huge game on Friday. Send your top guy out there. Now, Porcello's been the top guy, but, Price is the big off-season acquisition, paying him a lot of money, struggled at the beginning of the year, and then came on strong at the end. He's got to come up big in that spot on Friday, right, Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, probably the most shocking moment in the entire postseason for the Red Sox was Lonnie Chisenhall, who hadn't hit a home run off a left-handed pitcher all season, taking David deep for a 3-run home run in game 2 and giving the Indians a big cushion there. It's baffling that David struggled to the degree that he did. It's baffling the 1-loss record in the postseason. The only time he's come up really big like an ace in a elimination game was probably in a game 163 that the Rays had to play to get to the postseason against Texas, and he pitched great. I think if you're a Red Sox fan, you hope that maybe this follows the arc that Josh Beckett did when he first arrived here in Boston. You remember his first year, I believe the ERA was north of 5, and he gave up something like 36 home runs. In 2007, he was an entirely different pitcher, 20-game winner, and was Bob Gibson in October. So, this is a burden that Price is going to have to bear, and it's a tough one. And it raises questions. I'm sure it raises self-doubt for him about, his inner fortitude when it comes to games in October. And it's, the contract just adds more pressure to what I'm sure is going to be a pretty tough off season for the guy. But I have a lot of confidence in David Price. I think we haven't seen in Boston yet consistently the Price that we've seen in previous seasons in Toronto, in Detroit, in Tampa Bay. So obviously he's a key guy going forward. The Red Sox have made an unbelievable commitment to him. There's 6 more years to go here. So hopefully he's as distressed about this as any fan. So hopefully this comes to an end sooner than later.
I think if he just got one win, just went out there in the postseason and registered one victory, that would get him over the hump, because this becomes a mental thing more than anything. It's not physical. You know what he's capable of doing. I think mentally this is still in the back of his mind and weighs on him every time he goes out there in the postseason. And let's hope that he's better next season. Is this considered in Boston this morning a disappointing season?
Well, I think, that's a great question. I'm sure I haven't turned on your peers here in the Boston market this morning. I'm sure there's a fair amount of bashing going on. On the flip side of it, you got to acknowledge that. Hold on one second here. My phone's there we go. You have to acknowledge that, this was a last to first season. The Red Sox, after back-to-back last-place finishes, winning the division title and winning it with a team built around a lot of young, exciting components that bode well for the future. So on the one hand, I hate to think that we've adopted the Steinbrenner mentality in this town, that any season short of winning the World Series is a disappointment. Obviously, would we have liked to have gone deeper in October? Of course. But I think there has to be a recognition. I think there is by, the more sophisticated part of your fan base that, you get into October, it's a crapshoot. I mean, the Texas Rangers had the best record in the American League, and they were swept by a team that wasn't certain of even going to the playoffs until the final weekend of the regular season in Toronto. You see that in the National League, that clubs that the Dodgers have their hands full right now with Washington. I'm really intrigued. I don't know how late you stayed up late last night, Roger, but that Giants Cubs game
I was there.
Epic last night.
I was there at about 1:30. I didn't quite get the walk off, but that was a heck of a game.
You did pretty darn well, my friend. So you just you think about all those great Oakland teams that never won in the postseason. So is it a disappointment? Yes. Was it a good season, a successful season? Yes. Am I straddling the fence? Yes.
Gordon, I have to ask you before we let you go. This is Zach Vai hanging out with Roger in studio. You covered the Red Sox for nearly 2 decades, and you're also a historian of the team. So you're probably the best or most qualified person to answer this question. And it's about David Ortiz. Considering that he is probably the best player to ever be a DH in MLB history, and he had the team success bringing 3 World Series to a starved franchise before his team success. Is it hyperbole to say that David Ortiz is the greatest Boston Red Sox of all time?
Yeah, I think it is, Zach. And here's the case that I make. I think you can't dispute that Ted Williams was the greatest player in Red Sox history. And when you imagine what his numbers would have been if he hadn't given up close to 4 seasons, serving in the military, his case would even be more untouchable. But what I argue is that while Ted is indisputably the greatest player in Sox history, you can make a very compelling case, and you just did, that David Ortiz is the most important player in Red Sox history. He changed, and you can maybe point to one night in October in 2004 where he changed the narrative of Red Sox history with those 2 walk-off hits in Game 4 and Game 5 against the Yankees, which proved the springboard to the greatest comeback in baseball history. The fact that he's a connective thread to 3 World Series, the fact that he's played as great as he has in the postseason compared to Ted, who only had 1 crack at it and had 5 singles and 25 at-bats in 46 against the Cardinals. Certainly, I think you can make a very strong case that he's the most important player in Red Sox history. And I know that the legions of Ted fans, they feel offended that anyone would even go down that road. But, I'm sorry. History does move on, and there are players who can nudge or take their place alongside Ted on the Mount Rushmore of Red Sox history.
Yeah, you can't argue with the numbers of Ted Williams. I just look at it, and since I've been closely following Boston, I've been in Albany for 30 years, and in those 30 years, David Ortiz has been awfully, as you said, a good term, important to the Boston Red Sox team and franchise.
Yeah, and both on and off the field, I think that should be noted too, and the fact that clearly, I mean, if you want to contrast final acts, Ted Williams hits the home run in his last at bat, disappears into the dugout without tipping his cap to fans. Updike wrote, "God don't answer letters." Well, either, like I wrote this morning, I said, either David is content to remain in the ranks of the mortals, or gods have gone through some sensitivity training in the interim, because David went up back onto the field yesterday in one of the I think one of the most unforgettable moments in Red Sox annals, waving his final farewells to the fans, and who didn't leave. I'm sure you guys saw that there were 39,000. It was the biggest crowd in 50 years at Fenway, and most of them didn't leave until David emerged from the dugout one last time.
Yeah, and as soon as that game was over, the storyline became David Ortiz, and the fans wanted him on the field, and he came out. That was quite the ending for quite the career for David Ortiz. Gordon, always a pleasure. We appreciate a few minutes here in Albany, and I'm sure we'll get back in touch.
Sounds good, fellas. Take care.
Thank you, Gordon. Gordon Edes.